All right, and let's try this share screen again. Okay, well, so to introduce myself, wait, why is this? Sorry, I'm having technical difficulties on screen and okay. All right, so to introduce myself, I'm Dave Miller. I initially got my bachelor's in human factors and psychology at Cornell. I worked in consulting for several years at US Ergonomics, which at the time was 2 people and then 3 people, so small company with a big aspiring name. Then went back to school, got my master's in persuasive interface design at New York University. Spent all my time with the interactive telecommunication program people. And my thesis was on how do you get people to wash their clothes in cold water. So I wired up the washing machines in the dorms and put stickers on the washing machines, try to sway people's behavior. Then went to Stanford, got my PhD in communication research. You'll meet my advisors sort of virtually later in the evening. So I studied human-computer moral conflict and used virtual reality to do that because it would be too dangerous and not really a good experiment for doing it in real life. I did my first postdoc at Cornell, taught there, and then have now moved to the University of Central Florida, where we're doing a lot of work on readability, but also trying to get started again on some research in driving and human-computer interaction. All right, so I want to sort of foreground this talk, not so much a talk, but a discussion with a sort of starting with your brain. So to grossly oversimplify, and anybody who knows anything about brains or cognitive science or neuroscience or anything is going to come after me. But to grossly oversimplify, there's kind of 2 parts of your brain. There's the inside and the outside. So the inside is like the lizard brain. Lizards, reptiles, they really only have these middle structures of the brain. And as animals got more sophisticated, they grew new structures around those middle pieces that are slower, but allow for top-down control. I mean, in some sense, you could literally say top-down. And those outer structures, the frontal cortex and prefrontal cortex, which are highlighted here in the sort of magenta and the purple, those allow us to do higher reasoning and overcome the lizard-like reactions. So if you go and you put your hand down on something hot, you just jerk it away. That's in your brainstem. That's not even into your brain. But when you have a quick decision to make, like, is that really a lizard? That is, well, that's memory recall, so I'm getting it wrong. But if it's something that's that doesn't require that requires a very fast response, that doesn't really engage your higher functions. And there have been a lot of people who've talked about these multiple process cognition models. So probably the most famous is Daniel Kahneman. He wrote the book Thinking Fast and Slow. And other people have said, well, there's not just two processes, there's not just two processing streams. There might be, you could break it into three. And we could go down the rabbit hole if you really want me to. You can certainly read quite a lot and learn an enormous amount about this. But to simplify, there's the fast system and the slow system. Kahneman uses the term system 1 and system 2. Other people use other names, but they basically refer to the same things. Whatever you do, don't think that they're divided by like half of your brain. And all the stuff that people say about like creativity is on one side of your brain and other stuff is on the other side, logic is on the other side of your brain. That's not true either. I just like this picture because it's got fun colors. Maybe I should go draw my own pictures or find a better one about the whole idea of the inside and the outside. But anyway, to get back to the topic, you have these two streams of processing in your brain. And these have been tested by using neuroimaging, like MEG or functional MRI. So it actually does correspond to things that are happening in your brain. And to illustrate this idea of top-down control, I want to show off the Stroop task. So is anybody familiar with the Stroop task? Anybody?
Yeah, I am. The strip task is when you read the words of colors, like the word red or the word green, but they're in different colors, and it basically makes your brain kind of confused because you want to focus on the colors from one side of your brain, I guess, but the other side is focusing on like the textual words. So it's like two forms of processing.
Exactly. So Isak got that one. So let's try this out, and I want everybody to unmute and just shout so name the color, don't read the text.
Red.
Red, green. They're the same for both. Blue. Yellow. Orange. White. Red. Blue. Green. Yellow. Blue. Yellow.
Orange.
Oh, yellow.
Yellow.
And green.
So see how now the
Blue.
ones in the other column here it's taking extra time and causing more confusion because there's now a mismatch, and you're having to activate that top-down control to inhibit that automatic response of reading the word. And we can keep playing this, but it's just this whole idea of top-down control is necessary when you've got a more difficult task, especially something that goes against your automatic training. So I know there are some people from Boston dialing in from Tufts, some people in New York, and it's like you have to if you drive in those places, excuse me, if you drive, you have to train yourself how to steer into the skid. I guarantee there are not that many people here in Florida who know how to deal with driving in snow and steering into the skid, because you have to train yourself to do it and essentially make that an automatic response. And it turns out that you can actually make that such an automated response that professional race car drivers don't actually do extra cognitive work when they have to steer into a skid. One of my colleagues at Stanford did research on that of professional drivers in race cars with EEG on their heads. So I want to sort of switch us from this cognitive science frame a little bit over towards information science, computer science, communication, and psychology, to go and introduce something that is called the media equation, or computers are social actors. So Cliff Nass, who sadly died a couple years ago, he was my first advisor at Stanford, and Byron Reeves took over. And the two, they'd been collaborators since 1986 when Cliff joined the faculty at Stanford, slightly after Byron had. And as psychologists and sociologists, so Cliff had his PhD in sociology, they came up with this idea of people unconsciously treat interactive media, or computers, robots, virtual agents, as if they're real. So like you go and you look at things on TV or a movie, or even reading a book, you start to feel the emotions, you start to, you know that it's not real, but part of you still feels it. And to test this, they started to go and run a set of experiments based on the premise where it's like, all right, let's go take an experiment that's designed for 2 people, and we'll sub out one of the people for a computer or a robot and see what happens. And it turns out that a lot of these experiments work pretty much the same way when you've got a person interacting with a computer as when you have a person interacting with another person. And one of the complaints is people say, oh, well, that's anthropomorphism. And there's a great paper by Cliff Nass and Youngme Moon from 2000, I can send you the link, about basically rebutting the idea that it's anthropomorphization. So obviously there are plenty of anthropomorphic interactions. So we see Baymax, he kind of reminds me of my friend Brian, one of my colleagues from Stanford, but friendlier. Sorry, I know Brian's not tuning in, but I'll make fun of him anyway. So Baymax has a face. Baymax has hands. Baymax shuffles around. Baymax takes care of your medical needs. He's obviously anthropomorphic. Hello Barbie is obviously anthropomorphic, although perhaps distorted in other ways. And we'll talk about her a little bit when we get to the biases part of this discussion. But so there's obviously the anthropomorphic things. You could think of Samantha from Her. She doesn't have a body, but she has a voice, and a human recorded voice, so voiced by Scarlett Johansson. So that has some anthropomorphic features. But there's also these interactions with computer systems or robots that are completely non-anthropomorphic. And so you go and you see those forms, like you go and you work on, you do your banking online, and then it says, will you fill out this form? Your interactions with that form are influenced by social rules, even though it has nothing to do with anybody human. And so this led to research on unconscious politeness. So if we look on the one side, the left side here, Cliff ran this study, so with his team on politeness. So they have people go and they sit down in the lab, and they work on a computer, and the computer teaches you a set of facts. There's a little teaching program, and then at the end it says, please rate my performance in teaching you. Actually, it doesn't say my. There's kind of an important hair to keep thinking about. So the computer says, please rate the teaching program performance. And people in the other condition, they have 2 computers. There's the computer that they use for the teaching and learning task, and then another computer for rating the teaching and learning task. The people who have the second computer that's just for the rating give the program lower ratings than the people who do the rating on the same computer. And there's a third condition where the people rate the program on a paper form. So can somebody, preferably who has not read the paper or read the media equation in the book, expound on this. So anybody out there? So why is it that people are giving higher marks to the same when they rate the program on the same computer than when they rate it on a different computer?
Maybe because it has like anthropometric features, like there's more, it's doing more, or they're interacting with it.
No, so they do the exact same task, and they just go and they get to the last page of the thing, and then they go to the thing that says, please rate the teaching program. And so they did the study first with regular, like a broad swath of undergrads, probably a lot of comm students, psych students. And then they did it again with a bunch of computer science grad students to go and make sure that it's not like some criticism was, oh, this is the people rating the teaching program are thinking about the programmers on the other side. And it's like, no, that doesn't work, because then the ratings would be the same. Doesn't matter what computer they do it on. It's this unconscious politeness effect. People are being polite to the computer, even when Cliff comes in and interviews them afterward, and they say, of course I'm not polite to the computer. It's a computer, it has no feelings. It just like tells me random facts and I have to remember them. And then it asks me how well I learned some facts. So even without an anthropomorphic feature, we still are polite to computers. So we should probably keep that in mind when we're designing the rating forms if you're doing user research. And another study also discussed at length is in the media equation in the book and some journal papers, is this idea of computers as teammates or robots as teammates, this very simple affiliation. So we got Blue Man here, and so what Cliff and Byron did is they put a piece of blue painter's tape on the computer, and they gave people a blue armband to wear in one condition, and then in the other condition they gave people a blue armband to wear, and they put a piece of green tape on the computer. And they find that people, when they do this desert survival task, they have better performance. They like the computer more. They have a higher affiliation with it. When the only difference is the color of the armband matching the tape. It's kind of nuts, right? It's not like R2-D2 and Luke Skywalker, they go way back to like before the Death Star, back out in the desert, like they were buds. This is a piece of tape matching the armband color. So we have these non-conscious responses. So it means that we have the ability to manipulate these factors and we have to be mindful of them when we design systems. So if we have a robot as a teammate or a co-pilot or something, we should think about them as if it's very much analogous to a human co-pilot.
200, jump maybe 50, flat lathe to flat lathe. 200, dip, 100, rightish big jump, go 150, rightish jump.
Oops. So we think about like a human team. We've got the navigator and the driver. The driver's job is to do what the navigator says. It's a little bit different from the bomb disposal robot and the the technicians who are driving it, but people, you obviously would have a high affiliation for your co-pilot or your navigator, but people like in the Army, they get really worked up when their bomb disposal robot gets blown up. They're like, they call headquarters and they're like, the robot got blown up and we need you to fix Bob. And they're like, who's Bob? Bob, the bomb robot. And they're like, well, we'll send you a new one. And they're like, no, we got to have Bob back. And the people at whatever, like Boston Dynamics or Northrop or whoever makes these things were like, wait, what? They're like begging us, like the people are calling from Iraq to beg us to rebuild their robot that's in a million pieces, not to just send them another one. It's these human treatment of interactive things in as if they're human-like entities that is at play here. I mean, there were reports of children committing suicide when their Tamagotchis died. I mean, it's kind of nuts to think. I mean, to think about how impactful this is, that people are like, several children threw themselves in front of trains over their Tamagotchi dying. It's not even a real like live pet, it's a virtual pet on a little keychain thing that does die the same way that a dog or a hamster or a fish does, except that you can stick a pin in the back of the Tamagotchi and bring the virtual pet back. Can't bring Cinnamon back. So people, questions, comments on the media equation. And
So why did the kids, why did they have the same kind of reaction to those virtual pets as real pets? Like what is that phenomenon? Is that the same?
so it's kind of the same things. Think about like, if you have to feed your pet, you have to groom your pet, whether you do it by actually putting food and water in the bowls or pressing the buttons on the Tamagotchi, there's that interaction with it. And apparently if you forget about your Tamagotchi for too long, first it like begs for food in like a little virtual on the screen way. And then it just pops up a little tombstone. The people who designed the Tamagotchi, I guess they thought that it was cute or funny or even a good idea to punish people for not doing what they're supposed to do as if it's a real pet. But it actually drove at least one, and I think several children, to suicide because they're like, I let my Tamagotchi die.
Yeah, that's wild and really sad.
So
I agree.
but this doesn't just happen with children or even bomb disposal technicians. These are major issues even in things like cars. I mean, so we talk about cars sometimes as big robots that you get to be inside or drive. And one of the stories, this is drawing on a different one of Cliff's book. So Cliff Nass and Scott Brave, they wrote a book about speech interfaces. And the first car that had a GPS navigation system was the 1995 BMW 5 Series. So rich German men are the people who buy a 5 Series BMW. And the system had a synthesized female voice. And people would go, they'd put down their big pile of Deutsche Marks, drive off, and then they'd come back to the dealership a little bit later and they'd be like, hey, the navigation system is no good. And the technicians would be like, all right, let's go navigate to some place and see how it does. always does fine. And so the BMW people are perplexed, and they're like, all right, let's convene a focus group and start interviewing people and try to figure out what's going on, because there's obviously not a technical problem because we can't replicate the bad directions. And one of these German men who's sitting there in the focus group says, I won't take direction from a woman. What does she know about what does a woman know about directions? And the BMW technical people sitting there are like, it's a computer in the car. It just has a female voice. I mean, we just thought that it would be a good idea for it to have a female voice instead of a male voice to give you directions. And they're like, it's another example of, so it's an example of sexism and this unconscious reaction to a computer system influencing people's behavior. It's kind of interesting that this is happening because back in the 50s, Convair, so one of the US aerospace companies, had recorded human speech in an early supersonic bomber, and they got some, I think it was a country star to voice the things that said like, pull up, pitch angle, bank angle, things like that. So these things actually could be somewhat flexible over time. And certainly now I kind of think, what's the direction of this? So the fact that a lot of speech interfaces have female voice, whether it's that are getting better, but they're still somewhat synthetic and you can still hear them as synthetic, is that changing people's impression of sexism? Is it reinforcing sexism? Because it's like, well, you're ordering Alexa, a female gendered robot or agent. What do people think about that whole idea of sexism, again, being either reinforced or lessened by these interactions with robotic systems that we've essentially given a gender to?
I mean, I think it's wild. I'm not, I guess, surprised because it's just kind of validating what already exists in society. But it's interesting how it's applied directly to just virtual systems, even though subconsciously we know they're not real people, but people still use the same bias, just as you were saying.
So do you think it's possible to use this to combat sexism? Flip it around as opposed to it being like, oh, well, we'll gender our virtual agent and you get to order her around. Do you think that it might be possible for Alexa to go and push back against sexism?
I don't know.
Sounds like a question for science.
See what the other people think.
Anybody?
I think that it could absolutely be used to fight sexism, kind of like what you were saying about like having it reverse. And it's actually a really interesting research question, like you said. I don't know how that would be designed, but I think it could absolutely be used for that purpose.
Yeah, I think this is a fascinating research question. We should kind of put it on the list of future projects to be like, oh, what happens when Alexa says, hey, you speak to me with respect, don't command me, say please. Or perhaps even more forcefully. You're like, Alexa, get me sandwiches. And you're like, and Alexa's like, go make your own sandwich. Treat me with respect. Robots have feelings too. Human rights are robot rights.
I think that kind of like goes along with like, I'm sure that there has to be something about just like the perception of AI and like people's perceptions of AI whenever there is a male voice versus a female voice. And I'm sure that that could be like this question that you're currently asking could probably like build off of those papers probably.
Yeah, so Wired for Speech, the book that Cliff and Scott Brave wrote, it came out in 2005. And that's a long time ago. And I think that a lot of things may have changed since then, but some things probably haven't. I mean, it'd be really interesting to reinvestigate some of those questions, both as people have gotten a lot more experience with technological systems. They've made it into not just rich people's cars, but everybody's pocket. And we have a lot more intermediated things. So I mean, 100 years ago, you interact with the shopkeeper, or maybe like high technology is mail ordering something from Sears and Roebuck. Now it's like, I can go pick up my thing and be like, Alexa, get me whatever. And it gets delivered tomorrow. And I can watch as my copy of The First Circle gets delivered on my Ring surveillance doorbell. Anybody read The First Circle? Anybody? Anybody know The First Circle, the Solzhenitsyn novel? Slightly aside, it's about people in a prison camp who have to build a surveillance system for the Soviet Union, set in like the 50s. But now we're living this slightly dystopian life. But with more and more sophisticated technology. So just to bring us back to the slide here, Tesla released full self-driving recently. And of course, it's not ready for prime time. People are reporting that the moon is mistaken for a yellow light, so the system just jams on the brakes. It misses things, it has false positives. It requires a lot of human supervision, but humans are really bad at supervision. And so putting, like, you wouldn't want your co-pilot to be poorly performing, but what you really don't want is your co-pilot to be most of the time reliable, but then desert you in the most important circumstances. And that's one of the big problems with computer systems right now. So you go to the Tesla dealer and you slide your big check across the table, and they slide you this little key card, and they're like, enjoy your Tesla, off you go, goodbye. And you are now buying more sophisticated automation than expert pilots were getting in the past. In some ways, it's even now, like the autopilot system in an airliner doesn't have as hard a job as what a partially automated driving system in a car that you can just buy for $50,000. And so we've got to think about these psychological issues of human reliability. What role are we placing humans in? And are we expected, if we expect humans to supervise machines, I mean, Paul Fitts is like ready to get out of his grave and be like, I wrote this in 1951. It's a bad idea for humans to supervise machines. Have you learned anything? And the human factors people will be like, hey, Paul, like Ghost Paul, Zombie Paul, we know, but the engineering people at Tesla, Mercedes, Toyota, you name them, like, they're like, but we got to sell cars, so we're just doing it. So I know the people in like in coming from the human factors program at Tufts. I mean, I know that you're fighting the good fight the same as we are over here, but this is a huge problem that people just think that we can engineer our way out of fundamental human psychological and cognitive issues. And I kind of feel like we can't. You can, I mean, and you end up with these situations like the prevalence paradox. So I just want to kind of pin that for pushing us kind of in a little bit of a different direction, but it's still tied into this issue of we cannot overcome the way humans are because we've been this way for a long time. Some stuff you can educate or train people, but some stuff fighting against evolution is really hard. So comments and questions on this?
So I do have a question. So my background, I'm in a communication program and I am not really too familiar with the computer science side of research. I know I have heard the terms like supervised and unsupervised before.
Okay.
So whenever you say like supervising tech machines or robots, like what do you mean whenever you say that?
Okay, so the computer science people, when they talk about machine learning, there's supervised learning and unsupervised learning. So if, say that I wanted to train the postal sorting system, this is a real example. So it used to be that people would go and read the addresses that you wrote on the letter. And they're like, well, this means we need a lot of people. So they're like, all right, can we train a computer to read writing? So first it gets, they say like, all right, here's a whole bunch of examples of an A, and here's a whole bunch of examples of a B, and here's a whole bunch of examples of a C. And the computer learns through seeing all these examples. All right, things that have these features are an A, and these things that have these features are a B and are not an A. And the supervision part comes in that we're basically giving the computer relatively explicit instructions. I'm sure somebody else on the internet has a better explanation of this, but we're basically saying like, these are like, this is an A, this is not an A, this is a B, this is not a B. And it's supervised in that sense that humans are involved in the training process. Unsupervised learning, somebody please correct me if I'm getting this wrong or just butchering it. But my understanding of unsupervised learning is that it's like, all right, let's go and throw a whole bunch of stuff at this computer and have it just divide it up. And it'll figure things out and be like, if we were really lucky, it would go and it would divide up our set of letters into a set of neat bins, one for each letter and character. But it might screw it up. So like mixing up ones and I's and L's, because they all kind of, they could kind of look the same, but they could also look different. So unsupervised learning might not be the approach you would take to building your reading recognizer, but you might do unsupervised learning for some other task where you just want to go and be like, all right, let's have the computer like figure out what these things are, because maybe even humans aren't good at figuring out the categories of something.
That's very helpful. So is it kind of like with supervised learning, is it sort of like you feed the machine learning algorithm like a predetermined set of data that's like finite, as opposed to unsupervised, it would just be like, here's everything, sort of. Is that kind of like in the ballpark?
Yeah, I think that kind of makes sense, where it's like like driving is like the things that you can find in the world are an open set. Like there's no limit to the amount of things that are out there. And you could just be like, all right, we'll give you some idea of like, don't hit solid things that have a big radar reflection. But if it's a very small radar reflection, you can just kind of do that. And the computer can just start classifying things and be like, this is a thing and this is not a thing, based on like how dense it is in the radar reflection or how big it is on a camera.
Okay. No, that's really helpful. Thank you so much.
I hope somebody else would jump in if I'm getting that wrong. But yeah, probably best to also consult some much more authoritative source on machine learning, because I am not a machine learning expert by any standard. The supervision that I'm talking about is humans supervising a computer doing some task. Like imagine that you're teaching somebody to drive. So you think about the driving instructor tells you what to do. And did anybody take driving school where the driving instructor has the extra brake pedal? So
Yeah,
if you
I did.
screw up, yeah, so if you screw up, like you start to go and the driving instructor sees that the light isn't green yet, they'll hit the brake pedal. That's your job now with an automated vehicle system, is to make sure that it doesn't screw up. So you're like watching over it. So it's a different type of supervision than the machine learning supervision. It's sort of more the classical idea of I'm supervising this thing, like I'm watching this pot to make sure it doesn't boil over. And I think I heard another question or comment from somebody else. No. Okay, so going back to Byron's favorite thing, television, the idea of the media equation is really powerful in this area as well. So if you perceive things that are not real as if they're real, like you get a response to an image, even though you know that it's not the real thing. And this kind of leads us to this phenomenon called presence or telepresence. And there's a bunch of great papers on this, and there's a whole journal called Presence that talks about this issue with respect to virtual reality. But so like, if I go and I show you this picture of the snake, if I had you wired up with the eye tracking glasses with the pupillometry, so it would measure that your pupils might dilate a little bit. And especially if you're afraid of snakes, your skin conductivity would increase and your heart rate might increase. And you might have this specific heart rate signal called defensive cascade. But there's no snake here. It's just a picture of a snake. I mean, the evolutionary biology people, evolutionary psychologists, they would say like, well, out in the savannah, there were no pictures of snakes. If you saw a snake, it was really a snake. So you better have that adrenaline start going to get out of the way, or at least just not step on it. And we're left with these vestiges of things in an environment that requires us to now exert the top-down control to be like, that's not a snake, that's a picture of a snake. But we can use this to our advantage. You think about like watching movies. Like last night, I was over at my friend's house and we're watching scary movies, and I know that they're not coming out of the TV to go and whack me stab me with the knife, but I see the knife, I see the stage blood, I see the whole thing, and it causes the adrenaline to go. It gets the emotions going. Like I'm like, don't go in there. Like you shout at the TV, they've measured that people's level of testosterone varies as they're watching a soccer game on TV and their team does better or worse. Like that your team scores a goal and you get like a whole bunch of these chemical changes, and then the other team scores and your testosterone level goes down a little bit and your cortisol level, the stress hormone goes up. But you're watching other people play soccer on TV. I mean, this is like the Olympics are on, like people, like you're sitting at home and you're cheering for people who can't possibly hear you because you're here in watching from the US and you're watching people compete in Japan, maybe even not in real time. The swimming might be over by the time you watch, but you still feel it. And we can use this for science. So I spent a couple thousand hours in the driving simulator watching people for my PhD. Of all the things, it's not the worst way to spend a couple of years doing a PhD, especially if you have access to virtual reality. And so I was studying human-computer moral conflict. And so we have people in our, Stanford used to have a really great full vehicle driving simulator. I kind of can't believe they threw it away. And I put people in this situation. So if you look, you can see this woman, she's in the car and there's a little green box around her face. That's the computer coding her facial expressions. None of the face coding engines are really that good, at least certainly not yet. But we've got her wired up with electrophysiology. So this green stripe on the bottom, that is her skin conductivity, and this blue line on the bottom, that is her heart rate. So as things start happening in the simulation, things start happening in her body. So we start playing the video here. She's driving down the road in the fog, and she's approaching something, but she doesn't know what's coming. And she smashes into this picture of a plastic barrier. But we can see she has reacted as if it's real. She fights against the computer. She jams on the brakes. You see this big red spike here. That's the brake pedal. We can see her steer against the computer a little bit but it's going in the direction she wants to go. She's saving Mr. Construction Worker from getting run over. The computer is pushing her towards the barrier, but she, like, her conductivity goes up, her heart rate increases. If we had the eye tracking on, we would probably see that her pupils would dilate. She's reacting as if it's real, and then she skids to a virtual stop, and it's like, oh wait, it's not real. This car can't move. It's basically bolted to the floor. Like, this is all virtual reality. It's not, I'm not in a snowstorm. I'm sitting in a lab at Stanford. So we're using this phenomenon of virtual presence to evaluate human behavior in a virtual environment where I can go and do this all day. I don't have to worry about how many times Mr. Construction Worker gets run over because he's not really a construction worker. I don't have to worry about destroying my simulator vehicle because those aren't even real plastic barrels. I get exact replication of my situation for every participant is the exact same. And I can do things that are too dangerous to do in real life. I can replicate it perfectly, and maybe not with a full vehicle driving simulator that costs a giant fortune and needs a big car and all kinds of fancy equipment. Now you could go to Best Buy and get a VR headset for a couple $100, get a decently fast computer. For $5,000, you can have an equivalent or better system than the fanciest VR labs had 10 years ago. And you could just be like, all right, I'm going to download Stanford's virtual study and do it in my house. Or I can go, if I was at another university, I could go and do the same thing and replicate exactly what somebody had at Stanford. I could do it here in Florida. I could go and send my stuff to Jeremy at Stanford, and he could replicate at Stanford what I'm doing here in Florida. I could send it to my colleague in Norway or my colleague in Japan, and we could see like, how do people behave differently in different environments or with different upbringings, different training. And we get it the exact same every time. Comments and questions on virtual reality and using VR for science. Okay, we're going to move on then. So to kind of shift us again, talk a little bit about sort of this technology and the interactions with psychology. So back in the 50s, Alan Turing and Herb Simon and Marvin Minsky, they're saying that we're going to have what they called strong AI. And so Marvin Minsky says, within a generation, the problem of creating artificial intelligence will substantially be solved. And then he goes out and watches 2001: A Space Odyssey, and it's like, how? And so it's been we're a generation past 2001. It is 2021, it's 20 years ago that we were supposed to have a sentient computer. And what have we got? We've got a really good Jeopardy playing computer. It is far from general AI. It is very far from taking over the world in any like Terminator sense. So what went wrong or what went right? I mean, we've got very different outcomes of the artificial intelligence and these machine learning things. So I probably should have put it in the text, but there's a great line, and I can't remember who said it, but he's like, the problem isn't that AI is too smart and will take over the world. It's that AI is too stupid and it's already taken over the world. Like, we're putting AI to work on Jeopardy, which is interesting. We put Watson to work on medical diagnostics, which is awesome, but we've put Alexa to work on selling us stuff. It's kind of, I mean, a little bit, maybe, I mean, it's potentially dangerous, putting our smartest people on the task of building smart computer systems to sell us stuff or drive us to the suburbs or basically feed capitalism, as opposed to necessarily doing things that are really of great value. But of course, I mean, obviously people have differing beliefs. Somebody says, I need more security, so I need to go and have a better police computer system that checks, is this person a flight risk or a risk of reoffending when I parole them? But then it turns out the system is highly biased. That's a danger. So this kind of, I mean, I know I'm speaking a little bit to the choir here, but we really need to be integrating science and technology studies, philosophy, and an understanding of history into our technical programs. Otherwise, we end up just rushing headlong into creating AI systems that are powerful, but very limited and may encode human biases or just go and do things that we really don't want. I mean, have people watched 2001: A Space Odyssey? Read the books? No? No sci-fi fans? Arthur C. Clarke?
Not for
Stanley
me.
Kubrick? You have?
No.
I-
Does anyone
you
else?
gotta watch. Okay, so go watch the 2001: A Space Odyssey. It is the like, so in the canon of great sci-fi, there's like Metropolis is like the granddaddy. Actually, that's like the grandma of all great sci-fi. False Maria, and then the papa is 2001: A Space Odyssey. I mean, it's the amazing sentient computer, and I'm not going to spoil anything, but you got to watch it. Stanley Kubrick at his absolute best, influenced an entire generation of filmmakers like George Lucas. I mean, imagine young George Lucas sitting there in 1968 in an ice cold theater watching outer space. But yeah, go watch that. So we've got these systems that are not generally intelligent. They're specifically intelligent. They're very good at, let's say, sorting our mail. I mean, think about that mail sorting system. It can go and read my chicken scratch handwriting almost as well as it can read the mechanically printed, easy to recognize letters from the computer. And we've got now these more and more systems are intermediating our interactions with the real world. So going back to that sales example, it's not me going to my friend's bike shop if I want to buy something, I could go to the bike shop and be like, I want to buy this thing. But there's lots of stuff, and you go to Amazon, you go to other internet, and Amazon's got a plan. Jeff Bezos did not become the world's richest man without a plan. And I don't know exactly how much is personalized persuasion, but I'm sure that they are using this. And this work is from, my friend, Stanford alum, he's now at MIT Business School, Dean Eccles. So Dean did his dissertation on personalized persuasion, and some people are more swayed by an expert appeal. So those reviews on the back of the book. And some people are swayed by social appeals, like how many people like the Muji gel ink ballpoint pens, which are quite good. And Amazon or other retailers are going to go and try to figure this out about you and use this to sell you stuff. I mean, it's the whole point of like Facebook. Facebook's whole thing is to say, we can learn all these things about you and sell that information to somebody so that they can target advertisements to better sell you stuff. You are not the customer of Facebook. You are the product. I am the product. Fortunately, it doesn't work quite as well as they say, but in some ways it also works scarily well. Nobody really knows. I mean, if people figured out that Facebook wasn't quite as like Facebook goes and they're like, oh, we're not good at influencing people on politics, but we're really good at selling people stuff. How true is that? Like, we don't really know. I mean, their stock price would tank and my neighbor would be broke if people were like, well, this doesn't work at all. So it's probably somewhere in the middle of like, yeah, it does get people to go out and vote, but it's not a guarantee. Like, there is no sell button. But we come to this question of, to whom does Alexa owe allegiance? Is it to me or is it to Jeff Bezos? I mean, I can steer this a little bit. If you look at that right panel, there's that button that says like climate pledge friendly and it reorders the items, but who is doing the ordering to begin with? Why is it that this specific item is on top? Well, it says so. It says that it's like sponsored items on top. But the rest of that ordering, it's like, is it like what's the default? Is it by price? Is it by margin? Is it by how good it thinks that this product is for me? Does it know that the only Apple thing I own is Apple stock? I don't have a Mac. I don't have an iPhone. It's pointless to go and show me Apple products. How, like, what is the algorithm's job? Is it to help me or is it to help make money for somebody else? And these are serious questions.
I kind of really like the point that you're bringing up with this, right? So it's like in my program, so like I study morality and how it applies to technology, and it kind of like there is this question between like where the line should be drawn when it comes to these certain programs, when it comes to these certain AI, where it's like, are these AI serving to fulfill the egoistic needs of the user? So like, is it relating to like autonomy? Like, is it helping me be autonomous? Is it helping me be competent? Or is it giving me safety? And then as opposed to other altruistic kinds of moral grounds where it's like, well, are we designing these these programs, these AI to be like caring or fair, where it's like for the better good, as opposed to, oh, it's for, this program is for me and it's the robot is gonna, you know, give me a sense of safety or something like that, you know, those egoistic needs. And I think so it's kind of like really, I really like the point you bring up where it's like kind of where is the line drawn for some of these programs. I think it's really interesting.
I mean, it's a very interesting problem. Like you think about like you go into the supermarket and all supermarkets are kind of laid out the same. Like they've always got the refrigerated stuff in the back. And part of that is because it's just simpler that way. It's like, oh, well, I'll put the cold stuff in the back because it's easier to run the piping that way and restock the milk and the eggs and stuff from the back of the fridge. But also it means that the things that you want to get, like you go to the store and you're like, what do I need? I need milk and I need toilet paper. Why are those things always at the back? And it's the high margin processed food in between me and the one item I want. So I have to go walk past the Oreos to get the milk and then walk back. And it's like, but it's Milk's favorite cookie. Like Danny Wegman might not be an evil person, but he wants to make a buck off of me. And that may come at the expense of my waistline. So like, how much do we weight like the simplicity of the piping runs and the efficiency of the refrigeration system and the work of the people stocking the store against my health? And are there solutions like not carrying Oreos or putting them on the top shelf or the bottom shelf as opposed to the eye level shelf? And I mean, these are like, as designers, human factors professionals, probably should have pulled you at the beginning, but part of this power is in your hands. And you have to think about like, at what point do you say, I'm not doing it, or I want to do this in this other way? I mean, I don't expect everyone to be like Daniel Ellsberg or Edward Snowden, but maybe take a little bit of inspiration from them to be like, all right, I'm not going to be completely without moral scruples in the face of evil. but also some of this stuff isn't that evil. How evil are a couple of Oreos? Like perfectly good to eat a couple Oreos, just maybe not all of the Oreos all the time. Anybody else got comments, questions, other things you want to talk about as we've got the forum open here?
I think it's sort of kind of going back to like the perceptions and like the slide you have up right now too. Like I like whenever I see Amazon or I go on Amazon or whatever, and I see like those reviews and it's just like, oh, this is the top rated and it's from Amazon. I think like a lot of it too has to do with those perceptions, because I bet if you ask a lot of people, I mean, I don't know, I've never done a study on it, but I'm sure if you ask people about those products that have thousands upon thousands of reviews, a lot of people would probably say like, oh, those are just bot reviews or something that bump up the product, right? So it's kind of like, how does that factor into it as well whenever it comes to, you know, these computer mediated purchases or whatever?
Yeah, certainly that's an issue, and Amazon has a very difficult job as a company where they're like, all right, well, we don't want people buying reviews, or we don't want, like, we want people to buy sponsored placement from us, but we don't want them to go and pay a farm of low-paid workers to go and type in half grammatical reviews. We want to serve our customers, but we also want to serve our customer or real customers or our other customers who are the people selling things. And that's why you get the, like, you look on Amazon, there's so many like strange name items. Like it's the same factory churning out things with different names, and they bump up their profits in these strange ways because everybody's trying to game the system. Mm-hmm. And I mean, we're obviously veering off a little bit from straight up HCI, but these are pertinent issues for HCI, human factors, engineering. Like these are the things that happen on your watch. And you don't really get the ability to say, not my problem. I just made the front end, and the fact that people figured out how to game it, that's somebody else's department. It's like, yeah, you're kind of you grab a mallet, it's time, like you're involved in the whack-a-mole as much as you don't want to be. And certainly there are unforeseeable consequences, but there are a lot of things where it's like, we could foresee these consequences and we need to go and do things about them before it gets out of hand. I want to make sure that other people have room to elbow in on the discussion here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anybody? Okay, so I want to thank you for your time and ask for something from you, which is to evaluate this workshop and give you one more lesson. Sorry about, like, I've already overloaded your brain, but a couple of pointers on survey design, and then give you this link to we'll co-create this evaluation survey, and then I'll let you go for the evening because I know it's getting a little late. So I'm sure if people have studied survey design, there's different types of scales. So there's Likert type scales where you've got the scale points of, like, on a scale from 1 to 7, how how would you rate this product where 1 is terrible and 7 is excellent? Or you can have bipolar scale where it's, I guess that was a bipolar scale. So Likert type scale where it's like, it's unipolar. So it's like 7 greater than 1. So think about like, if you have like these scales where you can let people be indifferent. If you have an odd number of points, there's like the 5 on the 10-point scale. But sometimes you don't want people to have that option. So use an even number of scale points. Very important to avoid leading questions. So how good was this workshop? That's kind of leading the witness. So you don't want to go and say, how good was this workshop? You want to say something more of like, was this workshop valuable? Not valuable to highly valuable. And we have to think about social desirability bias. So if I ask you right now how much you like this workshop, you're going to be polite to me, or unless you're really mad, and rate it perhaps higher than you otherwise would. On an anonymous survey, especially if we don't have to worry about the unconscious politeness, the respondents will be more honest. And we have to also think about the order of the questions to avoid contaminating later measures. There's less of a problem with the survey of like how about this workshop, but with other things, if it's part of, say, behavioral study, we don't want to go and spill the beans on our study in a survey that we give somebody ahead of time, or we don't want to prime somebody, and there's a whole literature on priming. So we want to be careful with those things. So I'm going to copy and paste this into the chat window. So this Google form here is for now, where did it go? Here we go. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen again. Yes, it only has one question. And it's a nonsensical question as well. So the whole point is we're going to co-create this evaluation. Haha. Editors. Okay. All right. Well, now I can send out the edit link. All right. Nope, not just to direct everyone. So here we go. So now everybody's got the edit link to evaluate this workshop. So how are we going to do it? So what kind of questions should you answer as you're evaluating a, oh, I shouldn't do the screen share. There we go.
So do you want us to add questions as you go, or are
Yes.
you looking for our
Yes,
input?
please. Please. So I sent out the share link so that people can add some questions and we can discuss these sort of as we go and spend a couple minutes putting together this questionnaire. And then I would really appreciate it if everyone would fill it out so that I can use that for my teaching portfolio. Now, of course, that's maybe a little biasing, but I really want to know how well this worked for you and what was good, what was not good. So things like that. So. So the second question here, did this workshop meet your expectations? You can anchor it as not at all to yes or completely, but you could also anchor it to exceeded expectations. So you could think about that bipolar scale as, it's like, so instead of being 1 is not at all and 5 being it met expectations, 5 could be exceeded expectations and 3 is met expectations. I appreciate this, like picking the next date, but I think it'll be easier to go and try to schedule this another way, not as part of this survey. So I'm going to delete this question if you don't mind. So I just want to draw attention to this bottom question here. What is there anything else you'd like to see in the next workshop? What could be improved? Now, this is what's called a double-barreled question, and that's something that should generally be avoided because they're really two questions. So I'm going to break this into two questions. So people, how's this coming with writing up some of the questions here? I want to give this just a couple more minutes and then let you go off to your dinner or whatever it may be that you have on for the evening. But I really want to thank you for spending the time with me. And I hope that you found this valuable.
I thought it was a really awesome presentation. I really liked this interactive element towards the end, the way we're making the questions. I know one of the more difficult elements of actually doing presentations is engagement and maintaining a memory for the members of the audience of the presentation, I guess. So I'm certainly going to remember this awesome presentation and building questions with people that I can then answer. I thought that was a really interesting idea.
Thank you, ESAT.